Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Lower East Side Tenement Museum. My name is Laura Lee, and I manage the Tenement Talk series here at the museum. It's lovely to see you all here this evening for this event, and we're really honored to be partnering with MAP, Muslims for American Progress, NYC, on this particular conversation. Here at the Tenement Museum, we tell the stories of immigrant and migrant families who have called tenements on Orchard Street home. And a lot of people see us as a site where they can connect to their own family stories. And so it's really important for us to think about those connections and how they're being made. And especially think about how those connections are being made to stories that happen outside the walls of life of the tenements on Orchard Street, and thinking about what else is happening on the Lower East Side over time. So this conversation, which is happening during Ramadan, it's happening during Lower East Side History Month, is particularly special for us to be having, to think about the Muslim experience in this neighborhood, which is one that I think often isn't one that people associate when they think about the Lower East Side and the families who have called this neighborhood home. So we have a wonderful panel with us tonight to be a part of the conversation. I'm going to ask Rashida to come on up and have a seat. Before I turn it over to them, though, I want to introduce Elizabeth Becker, who is with the MAP project.
Thank you, Solara. So I'm from the other side of partnering on this project. My name is Elizabeth Becker. I was the principal investigator for the MAP NYC project, which is basically a project on the impact, the many impacts that Muslims have on New York City as a whole. And a lot of our work focused on actually storytelling. I think that was the part that was the most kind of important and inspiring to me. We tried to both kind of look at quantitative statistics, which everyone wants, but also the different stories and contributions of Muslim New Yorkers. And this is run by the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding, and they have a broader vision of using rigorous research to really empower Muslim communities and also to push back against a lot of the stereotypes that we see today. And so it's really wonderful to partner today with the Tenement Museum and to bring together some of our participants, three of whom you see on the end here: Rashida Ismaili, Abu Bakr, Ali Abbas, and Abida Kanam, all of whom are in our portrait series as well, which you'll see throughout the Tenement Museum. And this is Liz Kinecki. Okay, I was like, I don't know how to pronounce her name. She was a producer with CBS for decades, 28 years or 20. 14. Why did I think it was 28? Okay, 14 years. But she's produced kind of numerous programs on religion and public life, which you should check out, and was a producer in religion and culture. And so I think bringing her into the conversation will be really wonderful. But we want to make this a conversation, so please, ask questions and join in. So I'll turn it over to Liz.
Thanks for having me. I'm Liz Kinecki. Is this on? Yeah. Can you hear me? Or is it really for that? Yeah. Always producing. Anyway, so let me introduce our panelists. Here to my right, here's Abida Kanam. Close enough? And, okay, great. You grew up in a tenement on Orchard Street. You are an educator and a community leader, and you're a biology teacher at Robert F. Wagner High School for 20 years. You're a teacher leader with the American Federation of Teachers, a chaplain with the New York State Chaplain Task Force, a mental health first aid trainer collaborating with the Thrive New York City Initiative and beyond, and you're also a board member of the Long Island City Roots Community Garden. You're very busy. Okay, and to the right of Abida is Ali Abbas. He is an American Muslim writer and filmmaker and a New Yorker who lives on the Lower East Side. You're of Lebanese descent. He is the creator and producer of The Ridge, a series about a group of Brooklyn Muslim youth with superpowers, and the web series The Girl Deep Down Below. He is currently the Diversity Fellow at the Upright Citizens Brigade, which is in Chicago. Are you based in Chicago? Oh, in New York, okay, among other roles. He uses creative means to break through stereotypes about Muslims and other minority groups. And there at the end is Rashida Ismaili Abu Bakr. She's a New York-based poet, playwright, essayist, and short story writer. She has been in the creative arts for the past 60 years and lived among the artist communities in the Lower East Side, the Battery Park, and Harlem. She was part of the Black arts movement as a contemporary of poet Amiri Baraka and a friend of Stokely Carmichael, a leading civil rights activist from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Ismaili Bakr was awarded the Sojourner Truth Meritorious Award and the Puff and Trade Award, and she has been recognized by PEN America. So lovely to have you with us. You have such a distinguished career. So I think we'll just start talking. I think what's so inspiring for me is to be in this building. When I'm thinking about telling stories, I'm always thinking about where I am and the place, and a sense of place and community and how it influences what you create and how you give back. So when I think even about historic preservation and why it's important, I think about how it affects people who are living in the community and how almost like historical preservation and buildings like this become a touchstone for your identity. So this is relevant to our discussion today, I feel like. And we're going to hear from each of you, just sort of talking a little bit about your experiences here, and then I'll ask you a few questions, and we'll, roll from there. Okay, so I'll hand the mic to you, and there you go.
There's also another one if you want to.
Gee, thanks. So as Liz mentioned, I grew up on 147 Orchard Street. Not very far from here. I came here when I was a very young woman, and I grew up with my dad, who was also a community activist. At that time, I don't think I was thinking about becoming anything related to community activism, because when I first, not used to teaching with a mic. I have the teacher voice. I could project that really well. So I think at that time I wasn't really thinking about becoming a community leader, community activist. Growing up in the tenement, it has given me so much. So much. Now that I look back in those years, so much memory. I remember my first experience when I came to 147 Orchard Street. We were driving on a yellow cab, and the cab pulled up at the apartment building. We had to walk up 6th floor. And I was like, Dad, where's the elevator? He said, elevator? And in Bangladesh, we used to call it lift. Yeah. So I was like, where's the lift? And he's like, there's no lift. We can walk up. And he's very positive all the time, So I started walking up. We went up. We settled down. And then there came the time. I was like, I need to go to the restroom. Can you show me where the restroom is? He handed me a key, and he's like, it's in the hallway. First of all, my shock was seeing the bathtub in the kitchen. I walked in, and I was like, wow, this is where I'm going to be growing up. And obviously, this was not the view of the America that I was hearing while I was in Bangladesh. But my dad, he did a lot of great things while he was in that apartment. And these are some of the things I want to share today. I think tenement has given me a deep sense of gratitude. And I want to start that with, this is the month of Ramadan, so I'm thinking about gratitude. I mean, we should be thinking about gratitude throughout the year. But as I was reflecting, what I wanted to share with you first is that deep sense of gratitude, meaning, the things I have now and things I didn't have then. I'm grateful for both. The ability to think about and compare the things I didn't have then made me the woman who I am today. For example, we take so many things for granted. The closest park I knew when I was growing up would be East River Park. And my dad being a single father, he wasn't a single father. My mom was in Bangladesh. That was a choice they made, that he was going to live here and raise his 3 children, and she was going to be there and raise the youngest kids. And that was a choice. It wasn't like they decided to be separated. He would take me to East River Park. And now my children, they tell me the national park is Grand Canyon. So when we go there and I'm looking at the wonders of, what God has given us, and I wonder, like East River and Grand Canyon, the things I didn't have and things I have now. So that's the sense of gratitude it has given me. The second thing I wanted to say, like sense of home. Just, I look at the brick building, and when we started buying home for ourselves, I would see a frame building. The real estate broker would show us a building like frame and stucco, and I would always be looking for that building with brick. It got engraved in my psyche. So, my husband would be like, well, this is a good house. Why don't we just, And then as I reflected, it was the tenement that made, it got engraved in my brain that I needed that brick building to feel like it's my home. My parents had a brick building later on in Bangladesh, but I didn't grow up with the brick building in Bangladesh. In my formative years, I was in this building, in the Lower East Side. So my frame of reference is the Lower East Side. Do you want to say something, or I can go on for I can share more things.
Yeah, I mean, I want to add to that I really owe a lot to the Lower East Side and New York. I am originally from Chicago, and I graduated with a philosophy degree. I don't know why my parents let me do that, but so there wasn't much I could do with a philosophy degree when I got out of college. And I worked originally as like a freelancer for the BBC, for Routledge Press, and a bunch of like publishing companies, but I never really took on any like fictional work. And it wasn't until I moved, because I moved straight out of college to New York, and it wasn't until I moved to the Lower East Side and got involved with the arts community that I like learned to screenwrite. I worked as a PA on a couple of productions that we're shooting in the Lower East Side, because there's a lot of work being shot down here. In fact, most like Netflix shows you see, whenever they're like in Hell's Kitchen, in Jessica Jones or Daredevil, they're actually shooting in the Lower East Side. They're never shooting in Hell's Kitchen. So yeah, I think it opened up a lot of opportunities, and it even still continues to do so. Like I did a screening I just started working as a host for Univision through Gizmodo, and that came about because I was doing a screening at Comic Palooza in Times Square, and one of the production managers just came up and was like, hey, would you like to host your own show? And I feel like that doesn't happen anywhere else but in New York. As much as I love Chicago, nobody's ever come up and offered me work, and I feel like that happens so much here. People will like just randomly hit you up and collaborate. I had somebody from like TED reach out just because they're part of the same circle of friends like in the Lower East Side, and yeah, so to quote Mad Men, the city is everything. And specifically the Lower East Side, I think it has, I'm sure as you'll talk about, like a really rich history of artists, and specifically like artists of colors, and coming from like immigrant communities, and being able to bond with other people and work on that, again, I think is like something very, very New York. I know that sounds like so New York centric, but let me have this. No, it's really, I feel like it's very few places, especially now in 2019, have the resources and the spaces, and have the communities that fight for the resources and the spaces as there are in New York, and specifically the Lower East Side. So I too really love this part of, specifically this, I love New York, but I love this part of the city the most, and I can't see myself living anywhere else. I actually just came back from Houston this weekend from Comic Palooza, and they do like all these cool panels, and we got to do a panel next to Emilia Clarke, the mother of dragons from Game of Thrones. Yeah, it was like super awesome, but even then all I kept thinking is, I'm like, I kind of wish this was in New York. Yeah. Please.
I came to America August 1957. Most of you were not born. I came to go to college. and I came on a boat, which are almost not existent anymore. And we landed on 42nd Street, not 42nd, 40th Street, over by the Hudson River. It was also a shock that America had ports like that with water rats. I thought that only happened in Africa or in Marseille. I moved. I was with my ex-husband, and we lived for about a year in Harlem with the widow of a woman, an African American woman, who was married to his father's best friend. There were 3 men who came over on a boat together to go to college, and her husband was from Ghana. My ex-father-in-law was Nigerian, and the other man was from Guinea. I don't know what happened to the man from Guinea. He went somewhere else. The Ghanaian died about a few months before we arrived, and my father-in-law went back to Nigeria with his African-American wife that he met at Howard University, who was from the Sea Islands, from one of those islands off the coast between North Carolina and Georgia. Very, very African place. If any of you get a chance to go, you really should. I did a little research there many years ago, but really should go before it gets totally destroyed. It is being destroyed, and so that African heritage is really being destroyed. I came to the Lower East Side after having lived for about 2 years on 24th Street, between, where Broadway and Fifth Avenue sort of come together. So on the west side of Fifth Avenue is Broadway and what is some avenues of the Americas. We lived in Pearl Primus's studio, she had just gotten a fellowship to go to Liberia to study dance. And so most of our friends were mostly artists, studying and thought of themselves as musicians and writers, etc. And I didn't know that I'd fallen into the lap of the modern dance community. I knew Jane Erdman. I thought she was just this weird, strange, I always called her pioneer woman because that's what we saw in the tellies and in the films and and in the pictures of these very Nordic stoic women, with the long skirts and the very long hair, and she wore them, but she danced with them, and she had these huge skirts that would wrap around, and she used Pearl's studio to hang a lot of her costumes. I don't know if she didn't have a studio or what, but the modern dance movement was in that area. And down the street was Hopper, had a studio. He had the longest legs you can imagine. He was a very, very tall man. And when he sat, it looked like his legs couldn't fit on the floor. Like he needed more space. But he was a very gentle man, and everybody was in deference to him. He was really very, very nice. So I fell into this community of artists who were doing all the things that they needed to do to survive and to do their work. When Pearl came back, we were a bit uprooted, and somebody said, well, I know a dancer who lives on East 10th Street, and I'll ask her. And sure enough, she knew of a place. And so I moved to 404 East 10th Street. And and in my book, Autobiography of the Lower East Side, I talk a lot about that. That was one of the best places, I think, for me to be with a very small child, separating and later on divorcing. But it was a really good place because I too had walking up the steps, the bathroom in the toilet in the hall, and the tub in the bath in the kitchen. Actually, I didn't mind the toilet in the hall because at home our houses were such that one didn't have one's toilets, latrines, too close to the house because my grandmother insisted that the water would be, that you would contaminate, which is probably why Africa never had a cholera problem. If you think about it, Africans never had a cholera problem until we have had more contact with Western culture where they do a lot of things with the pipes and the water, and so sometimes our water gets a little bit contaminated. But we don't have cholera, like cholera epidemics like you hear about other places. So that, and around the corner from me on East 9th Street was a building in which Ismail Reed and Steve Cannon and Joe Johnson and Roland Snellings, who later became Askir Mohamed Touré, all lived in this one building. And so you know, it was a really, that really was how I got to know a lot of people. As far as Islam was concerned, aside from my being a practicing Muslim, I didn't see mosques. I didn't know other Muslims. But then one day, there were push carts, and women as well as men would push these carts with vegetables and fruits and things, especially when the weather, before it got too cold. And especially on Avenue C and B and ABC, that's what you found. And there was this woman, old woman, but she looked like all the other older Eastern European women. So I didn't see anything that distinguished her because all women wore scarves on their hair. Some people called them babushkas. But the Catholic women wore shawls around their hair and didn't go into the churches without them. So it was very difficult for me to distinguish if they were or were not Muslim. This woman, how I knew she was Muslim, she was pushing the cart and somehow her skirt got caught and there was some water there, and it was dirty water, and a dog passed by, and she said, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. And I said, why? Oh my God. And I said, who is saying that? And I looked, and she looked like what I would consider any normal white person. I mean, so I said, oh. So I said, salam alaikum. She looked me up and down. And then she says, salam alaikum, with a slight accent. And she said, you Africa? I said, yes. She said, me, at that time, Yugoslavia. She didn't say Yugoslavian, she said, Yugoslav. She said, la ilaha illallah, just like that. And she never, ever, ever said anything Islamic after that to me. It was as if she wanted to make that kind of contact. So I put that in my book because I think the Lower East Side doesn't acknowledge, or maybe doesn't even know, how old and how long Muslims have been on the Lower East Side, because this area has been very, very defined as havens for Jews who were escaping horrific conditions, Italians who were facing dire economic straits, especially the southern Italians, and so the tendency is to see either Jewish or Christianity, but not Islam. I don't know why we don't see it and we don't incorporate it more as one of the Abrahamic religions, but that is what I see.
That's great. I love that local, that feeling, because we forget. If you don't talk about it, we forget. And also we don't have those touchstones in the way that, because especially with the massive redevelopment that's going on in Lower East Side now. And actually, I want to ask, especially when you first came here and you didn't see a lot of Muslims, right? That story's perfect for this question, actually. How do you maintain your Muslim identity and your religiosity if you're not surrounded by other Muslims, is my question.
Islam is in the heart, and we pray. Islam is a very interesting kind of religion. I mean, it's very interesting because on the one hand, it is extremely social. The ummah, the community, the Muslim community, is extremely vital to the survival of Islam. At the same time, it is very, very intimate and very personal. And so the relationship between a human being and Allah is very personal. And you don't have to pay attention to other people. You have to pay attention to the relationship you create or the covenant that you make with God. So on the one hand, it survives by that kind of individuality, that individual experience that you have, maintaining your prayers, and whatever you do that you feel acknowledges that covenant that you have with Allah. At the other level, when you come from a Muslim environment, you know, you're used to certain kinds of communal activities, so that Friday is a very big day for us. Everybody dresses up, everybody goes to mosque, everybody brings food. Sometimes we eat, after Zohar, we spread our mats, we eat, or people bring food and you get it, or somebody comes after dinner, families come after dinner and visit. It's very social on that level, especially around the holidays like Ramadan. When I was young, we stayed up all night until Fajr, and then you have sahur, and then you go to sleep, you know. But then in many countries that got outlawed because it wasn't good for the Western economy, not for the West. So it actually, the West had great influence on curtailing a lot of social events in Muslim countries. You wouldn't think so. And also the visual experience of being a Muslim. You see someone that you can visually identify as Muslim. Not just women wearing hijab, but the way men dress. Muslim men don't walk around with their navel, the shirt down to their belly button, or their arms, No, I'm saying that specifically because we talk too much about, which gets into stereotype, which isn't what exactly you asked, but the stereotype is that there comes this Muslim and she's all burdened down with a burqa or looking like a shroud, or carrying all the looking in nondescript and covered from God knows from and there are people who do that. That is not necessarily in the Quran. You have to be modest. You have to be covered, but it does not say in the Quran this. That is one's social choice. Because I don't do it, I don't condemn or say anything. I'm just saying there are visual. If you're a Muslim, there's something visual that you can know when you see a Muslim. But also the mosques. you don't see mosques. You don't see places that you think you could go and get meat or food. There are things that you see young people doing, or gatherings that you would not see or see differently in a Muslim setting. So yeah, there's the visual presentation of a new place, and then there's a visual presentation of Muslims. Houses, the way homes are constructed, very few places, especially in a tenement, have the luxury of having a separate place where women can go and be, and men can go and be. Very few places. So women, sometimes they put up a curtain or something like that if they wish to. But so there are many manifestations of what it looks, what Islam looks like, you know.
That's really interesting, and things I wouldn't have thought of. Abida, I would be interested in hearing from you, because you had a regular stream of people coming through your family's apartment, and what that was. I mean, is that how you maintained your identity and didn't want to completely become American? Whatever that word means.
If I can be on the record and say, I remember when I came, the week probably, my father was like, you could do whatever you want within the walls of this house, okay? But nothing outside. And I was like, wow. Like, I know. But he was like, you could run naked around if you want. And I was like, wow. Like, you know, but I knew what he meant. Even though I was a young woman, I knew exactly the boundaries he was setting up for me. Because my dad was a religious scholar. And everybody in Lower East Side knew him. Even on the other day, I was going for a pilgrimage with my 2 sons and my husband. We were at JFK Airport. And we bumped into someone from the community. He's the CEO of a TV company, production. And he said, oh, you know, how's everything? And this is what people do. This always happens to me. And they're like, you know, you're so-and-so's daughter, because I'm his only daughter. I have 5 brothers, and I'm my daddy's little girl. I like to think I am still. My father passed away in 1996. And he said to me, he said, I was introducing him to someone, and he said, you know, her father was like an umbrella figure to the entire community. And this is what I hear all the time, how he was there for everyone. As a religious scholar, he founded the masjid on 11th Street and 1st Avenue. So Islam was very much alive and vibrant in our house. Not to say that my father didn't impose anything on me. And I think that's why I'm a practicing Muslim. I'm proud to say that. Because at that time, I didn't wear the hijab. And I remember I would walk to the masjid, the Islamic Center on 11th Street. He was the founder and he was the president for 9 years. And people, you know, sometimes people will say, that's your daughter? Oh my gosh, she's so beautiful. How come she's not wearing the hijab? He's like, you know, and he's like, don't worry about it. You know, she'll figure that out when she's ready. And I didn't know at that time what he meant. You know, this man with this white beard, my dad, and I would walk with him everywhere. I would go everywhere with him. He taught me everything. He would be like, read that sign. We're driving on, you know, FDR. He'd be like, read that sign quickly, Abida. And I didn't need to know where FDR sign ends, you know, FDR ends or where it begins. But he wanted me to be that quick. He wanted me to learn everything. And so we would go to the masjid and people would question. And later on, I realized he has given me that choice, that I have the choice that I want to make. He empowered me to make that choice about religion. And I put that hijab on me, you know, all by myself. So I really appreciated that. And I think, you know, women, we need fathers like that, who are there, you know, and who make us strong, who are open to have discussion, even private discussion. My father would ask me daily how school was. Anybody said anything? Did and everything. Like, did a boy say anything to you? And I'd be like, Dad. Like in the beginning, I would be like, I can't believe we're talking about this. He's like, but who are you gonna tell? Like, is there anybody in this house? Your brothers? I had two brothers I was growing up with. They were older than me. And, he was right. He was like, they're going to make fun of you if you tell them. So why didn't you just tell me? Was everything okay? It was that playful, relationship I had with him that made it all comfortable. We had people come to our house on so many occasions. My father worked full-time. He would be the president full-time at the Islamic Center. He would drive yellow cab, the immigrant life, right? And then he would translate at the UN. And then you would have immigrant, people coming to him, 10, 15 men at our living room, which was my bedroom, by the way. We had 3 beds in that living room, okay? And because the small bedroom was his bedroom. And whenever we had guests, and we had always guests, right? Because they always needed help. And he would be like, when people come, I want you to be in my bedroom and not come out unless I call you. Do your thing over there, and if I need any help, I will call you. So there was boundaries set as well. And he would openly say to the guest, I have a daughter here, guys. I just want you to know, everybody's welcome here, but I want you to be mindful that I'm raising a young lady here. Like, he would say that out loud, like, he's announcing that, like, I'm so important. I felt important at that time. There would be time when, I know we have so many immigration services nowadays in different languages. I try to go and help at the community. I'm an advocate. I try to help everybody. Sometimes, I was telling Ali, he said he doesn't sleep. I don't sleep either. And sometimes, you want to help everyone. There's so much need in the community. I think every community. But you want to do so much. And people would come, and they need help with so many services. And my father had, he was so blessed. He spoke many languages. He imparted that on me. Like, he would teach me Bengali, Urdu, Hindi, Punjabi. And I'm like, why am I learning all these languages? I want to focus on English. And now I realize why he was doing that. But of course, I was my daddy's girl. I listened to everything he said, some things I didn't listen, right? But he was okay with that. He's like, I know, that's the age we're going through. You're going to talk back. My son does the same thing, and I understand. So immigration services, people would come, and there are forms to fill out. And everybody would be like, can you take us to the, to the immigration INS? That's what it used to be called. And he's like, okay, I have to make the time, so maybe I have to take a day off. He would take the day off, and then he would say, who else in the community needs to go? Maybe we can make it a community thing. And now it became a community obligation. Like, he set it up where 5, 6, 10 people are going together. He's setting in a calendar. Who has to mark the calendar? Abida has to write it on the calendar. Which day, how many people are going, and then the INS forms are coming. So now, you know what? Let's take Abida with us. Is she available? Can we do it right after school? So if she goes with us, she can fill out the form. Now it's an assembly line, and I'm filling out all these forms. I had my training of filling out INS form, DMB forms for all these people. And, I'm grateful because when my father passed away, my brothers were in school and they had full-time job, and I got voluntold to go to Bangladesh to deal with my father's land. Because my mom, she was dealing with the grief, and now we had 3 younger brothers, and what was there waiting for me? More forms. And this time it was deeds. It was deeds, and it was, adaptation forms, because I decided to adopt my 3 brothers. So my father raised 3 children at the tenement. And then I decided to adopt 3 of his sons as my, my boys for 27 years. And later on, God rewarded me with 2 of my own. And now I'm raising 5 boys at home. But with my husband's help, of course. But, that's, and then immigration, getting them here. All that forms that my father taught me how to fill out here came so handy.
I'm
Because
kind of
I was
thinking
able
you
to
should have
do that.
become an immigration lawyer
And,
or real estate because all the deeds. That can bang
But
money.
I'm happy to say that at that time we didn't have these services, but many people who came out of the tenement stepped up, and they're actually immigration lawyers. I am actually close with some of the sisters, some of the girls who came up with me. They call me big sisters, but a few of them are lawyers from the tenement. And a few weeks ago, we went on a retreat in Poconos. And we were talking about the Lower East Side and what it has done for us. And everybody's a professional. Lawyers, we have, people working in the nonprofit, giving back to the community. And so, yeah, like a lot of people are doing great things.
That's great.
Yeah.
So Ali, I'm curious. You're like the modern example of, Muslim guy living on the Lower East Side. How do you maintain your identity, and how do you maintain your Muslim identity living on the Lower East Side in this very rapidly, I'll say it again, this rapidly gentrifying area? It's expensive. I'm sure you're paying a lot more than Rashida was when she moved in. Now you want to ask her, and you guys, right?
What?
Rent was 300 something.
But of course, $25 in 58, 59. It was, but I was only making $50 a week.
Our
Yeah.
rent was 300 something, I remember.
I'm paying $2,800 for a 1-bedroom. No, that's
There you go.
yeah.
Good old New York.
no. And then people come over and they're like, "You got such a good deal." Where in Chicago, you could buy like last year, I'd saved up some money and I was like, I'm gonna finally buy. I'm gonna buy in New York, and the real estate agent talked me out of it. And I'd never been in that situation where real estate agent, because they were like, "Look, the thing is like." You should only buy if you have like tens of millions of dollars to spend, because otherwise what you're doing is you're paying like $1.5 million for a place that's like 200 square feet when you could be spending $10,000 a month in rent to get like a 5,000. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like you can't even buy in New York unless, sorry, not to go on that
No,
rant.
I know.
was
Wait,
just
is this a real estate show? Okay.
Right.
But,
So if you need help being discouraged about purchasing property, I can help you out with that.
but tell me a little bit about I love. So I watched your web series with
the one in Chicago or the one in New York?
the girl deep down, and
Oh.
and it really made me realize how hungry I am for Muslim-centered women who are agents for change and agents in their own story. And I looked at it as like a Nancy Drew meets Stranger Things kind of thing. I mean, I really liked it. No, I don't know. I really liked it. I'm like, I want to see more Muslim women, driving the story rather than just being a background character, right? So I just want to. Can you talk about that? I know this is something you're really passionate about that, but is that are you informed? I mean, are you inspired by, the people that you meet walking your dog on the Lower East Side?
Yeah, it's all community. Like even in a lot of script work, like I make sure, because like one is it's not just like jamming in Arab or Muslim characters. It's just like I want to write from my experience. So like I make sure to put like Layla, because otherwise they'll be like, this is a Samantha. Like when producers get a hold of it. Yeah, and it's really just because I grew up in a house with a Saeed and a Selwa and a Rashid. Like I didn't, I didn't grow up with Toms and Johns in my house. I'm sure they're wonderful, but we just didn't have any. Yeah, so it's really just about like finding community, and then finding also like, so the Girl Deep Down Below, that was funded by the Chicago Digital Media Production Fund, who funded Brown Girls. Did anybody hear? Yeah, who got picked up by HBO. So they're like a really great grant if anybody here is into filmmaking. And you make episodic, and not episodic, but specifically if you make episodic content that people call niche, which I realize is just another way of saying white. It's like that's whenever anybody says niche to you, that's what they mean. Yeah, that not white is what they mean. Yeah, so it's about finding the community, because even then I noticed that like my work itself gets stronger, like for something that I'm not particularly like sure of. Trying to think. So there was a script that I'd written last year that got picked up by the Hollywood Bureau, and what they do is they get together with like Hulu and Wise and Disney, and they bring together 6 writers every year to do a lab. And this year the lab was entirely Muslim, which I thought was really cool. But I noticed from there, just from working that 1 week in a writing room with all Muslim people, like one completely different experience, like a lot less explaining, a lot more fighting, but like productive fighting, which I thought, like I mean, I said swear words I like didn't even know I knew.
Muslims fight?
Yeah. No, but it was great. Like it was nice to even like the good times are good, and even the times where you're like 2 in the morning wanting to strangle each other, there's like a very unbridled and loving. I don't know how to explain it. Everyone's a lot less defensive, which leaves you open to attack. But just from that, like that one script, which I had been like kind of workshopping with a couple of producers for a year, just last week got picked up for the 2nd round of Sundance's television lab. So like, I don't think it would have gotten there had I not had that writing room experience, especially because it's not like the main cast is an ensemble with a transgender Latina woman and a Black Muslim character who's an engineer, which is like we have a whole plethora of shows coming up about like Muslims who are having trouble dating and stuff, but very little in like the science fiction genre. Yeah, so it's really about like finding the community, because that only makes it stronger, even if you are fighting overnight.
All right, so I know you guys might have questions, and so I'll ask one, but if you guys have them, let me know, and we'll send the mic to you. So what do you want to, is there anything you want to talk about in terms of how can non-Muslims be good allies in the culture that we're living in today? That's one thing I want to know.
So for me, it's just been, like, if you are a producer, like for, again, like the Gizmodo show, my producer's white on that, and she came up to me because she was looking for that type of content. So if you're somebody who's like in a position of power to make that change, you should. One, and not only because like I don't think, like, don't treat diversity like disability. You should treat it as, because I feel like a lot of like systems are set up that way, especially in the entertainment industry, where you go into something and they kind of treat you like you're on like life support, and but you're not. You want to be recognized for your talent. You should see diversity because like you get perspective for like shows. Like Killing Eve on AMC, like I don't think that could have worked. Like people wouldn't have thought that worked. In fact, Sandra Oh didn't think that would work. She went in originally thinking she was going to read for a background role, and she ended up reading for the lead role, and she just couldn't even imagine herself in that. And now, you know, that's won a bunch of awards. But like that show only works because of the writing room. And like if you didn't have that perspective, you wouldn't have such an amazing work. So like if you are in a position of power, if you're a producer or a teacher or I don't know, a mentor or anybody who can make any sort of change, just remember that like diversity is a huge, huge strength, especially when the market's like now flooded with stories of like, does the white guy get the girl or not, or does the girl get the guy or not? Yeah, so see diversity as a strength, and if you're in any sort of position to make that change, then definitely do it.
Good.
I think just you don't have to have a special way of incorporating or thinking about Muslims. I mean, we're people, and we have we're human beings, and we have a particular way of being in the world. So does everybody. I mean, I'm getting suspicious of diversity, but until we come up with a better term and something else, I will sort of go along with it. But I agree. I like what you just said. It is not a disability that you have to like me in spite of. And I think that that aspect of diversity comes across much too often. You don't have to make a special effort to include me. Think of what you lose when you don't include me. I think of some people like, I have a good friendship with Carmen de Lavalade. I'm not saying it to name drop. I'm saying it to make a point.
But I am impressed.
Huh?
But I am impressed.
She is impressive. She is
So go
someone
ahead,
to
yes.
be impressed by. She is impressible. Her cousin was Janet Cohen. And her cousin was denied the ability to study ballet in a room with other girls because they were white. The teacher left the door open, so she actually got 2 classes because she saw what she was doing with the white girls, and then when they left and she called her in, she got 2 classes. And she ends up being the first black woman to perform in the Met, Aida and all that, and Carmen, everybody knows her accomplishments. Think about what the world of dance would be without her. So many people don't even know her name. Many people don't know Carmen, believe it or not, Carmen de Lavalade. But this world, the arts, would be so much less. So as I say, I am suspicious of the term. It is not a disability, but just think of what it would be if you didn't have a Romeo Bearden, if you didn't have a Maya Angelou. And it is very easy not to have these kinds of people. It's very easy. So when you say, well, I have colleagues who say, my God, Rashida, are you still practicing? Why would I not? I don't see any reason not to practice Islam. It's like, are you still pregnant? Oh, I thought you had the child for 4 months ago. No, this is a permanent situation here.
I'm going to start calling people like that. Like, Avita, how are you? Are you still practicing?
So it begins with a very immediate and personal situation. How you perceive yourself, and therefore how you perceive somebody else. When you get other aspects, when you put on more clothes, more whatever, it just adds to the person. So what I might first know about you is, oh, we sit next to each other on the subway, we take the subway to the same place. But when I start to learn that, oh, you like jazz. Jazz is a background of my life. Oh, you like ballet. I love ballet too. I was going to be Africa's first opera singer. All of those little things that we add to it. But we would never, but it starts with putting that onto me and maybe humanizing me. But I think it starts very, very simple. I am human, you are human. I'm very colored. I love it. Do not say you don't see my color. Don't tell me that you don't. If you don't see this color, something is really wrong. And I mean wrong. No, I don't. I'm not joking. I mean something is really wrong. Psychologically, you have done something to yourself that makes you need to strip me of all this melanin in order for you to, quote, see me or be with me. That's the disability you're talking about. It's not a disability. It's a marvelous accomplishment.
So elegantly put, I think. So to piggyback on what my brother Ali and Sister Rashida said, as a mental health advocate, I think everybody's dealing with some sort of deficit that stops us from living to live, laugh, and love every day. And so I think, in order for us to fulfill our lives, we need to accept one another. And in Islam, we have this thing called fardil kifaya, and that's communal obligation. So what it means is, one person, it can be a doctor. Not everyone has to be a doctor or lawyer or a teacher. So for me, I'm a teacher. And when I became a teacher in this area, that communal obligation is lifted from everyone else. Now, as a community, Muslim and non-Muslim, I've been teaching for 22 years in New York City Public School. So I'm doing my communal obligation, and for us, if everyone recognizes that, this person has lifted that communal obligation, it allows for everyone else to focus on their fardul kafaya, right? So, and we know in spiritual, learning, that everyone has different interests. Everyone who's sitting here, I know doesn't want to be a teacher probably, right? But everyone comes with different strength. And so as a community, it allows us to be stronger. And I like what you said, that's our strength. It's our strength. And if we all work together, so recognizing me, not only as a Muslim, but as that teacher. And you know what I get? I've been getting that for 22 years. Young kids, they never look at me as Muslim. Their thing is, that's my cool biology teacher. You know what I mean? That's my teacher that makes corny jokes. But I love being in that class.
You make curry for them too.
And of course, so yeah, bringing that point, that's something I learned being in the tenement, I think. Being resilient, being flexible. And so I can, as I was telling somebody earlier, I'm in the classroom. I can make, curry for 30 kids, or fusion like Chinese food, or pancake, whenever I want. I will pack things in, and I literally pack things on my tote, and my husband is like, oh, what are you doing? And, by now he realized that's what she's doing. She's going to be cooking something. And it's because, I'm teaching a heavy curriculum, a biology curriculum for my students, but my students are my community. And they come from, I have 150 students almost every year, and they come from 30 different countries. From Indonesia to to Bosnia. And the thing is, they see me not as Muslim. I mean, sometimes they will be like, Miss, is this halal? And I'm like, I don't know. And during Ramadan, I might just say, I'm trying to stay halal, guys. All this inappropriate language, I'm not sure if I want to hear it. And, we don't have that in my classroom. I'm so blessed to say the kids who don't function or so-called not behaving well do so well in my classroom. Even yesterday, one kid was like, I don't respect anyone in this building, miss, but I respect you. And I was like, I looked at him and I was like, is this a good thing? I was like, come on, honey, come sit here. And he's like, no, miss, you're cool.
How old are they?
And, they're 15, they're teenagers. And they tell you straight, they have no filter. And nor should they, I think. Sometimes they need to tell us how we're treating them. And I think it's important. Of course, we don't want to hear talk back sometimes, but it hurts. But no filter is actually important sometimes.
Okay, let's open up to questions, because, yeah.
So, assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings, everybody. First of all, so my name is Halima de Oliveira, and I'm actually the creator of the Not Without My Hijab play that's currently touring nationally. And this is the book that it came from, and it actually talks about my story. And I'm getting up and I'm here because I'm actually a product of the Lower East Side. I resonate with you, Rashida. I'm going to talk to you, Ali. And I have to talk to you because we actually went to Quran class at the 11th Street Masjid, and my teacher had a white beard. So if that is your dad, wow, okay? Yeah, it's really cool. It's a really cool thing. So, but what I wanted to say is in writing this book and in starting the play is exactly what you guys are exemplifying here. Is that as Muslims, you know, we are saying to the world, not without my hijab, and basically not without my Islam, not without my religion. And Rashida, she hit it like a nail on the head in just saying that my Islam is not going to go away. Like, it doesn't disappear. It actually makes me more of who I am. It actually makes me a better person. Like, you don't want me loose on the streets of New York without this hijab. I'm just being serious, okay? Like, I grew up here, train rage, like, forget, you know, road rage, train rage, okay? Rush hour traffic rage, okay? Let me tell you, okay? So my question to the three of you is that I'm sure you can probably fathom that having a play called Not Without My Hijab has not been an easy road. I've actually been on this journey since 2017. And the play, you know, the book got picked up for the play in December of 2017. And then we went, you know, we ran the circuit in 2018. We played in 4 states. The goal is to go 46 more. And so for me, there's been a little bit of a stall. And so for me, I guess I'm looking for advice. So how do I keep this going and at the pace? So we've impacted over 5,000 people through the play, just in the different cities. We've played in Philadelphia, we've played in New York, we've played in Washington, D.C. and Delaware, and you know, God willing, we'll be in Dallas, Texas in September. So how do I keep going? Where do I find the money? You said grants. That's why I'm talking to Ali. I'm telling you right now. So, you know, how do I keep going? And if you could give me advice on branding, messaging, what should it be behind this topic? Because literally I'm on stage doing what you guys just do every day. Thank you.
Oh, is it specifically for me, the question? Or? Oh, yeah, so in terms of funding, can you hear me? Is this on? Very weird. Yeah, okay. In terms of funding, find organizations, like right now, just off the top of my head, like Pop Culture Collab. Have you heard of them? They're great people to reach out to. So if you already have a project that's finished, there's a lot of organizations that help you with distribution nowadays. And if you do email them, try to email Meha Chalawi there. I'll give you her name. She's great, yeah. North African and Arab, and very, 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 very much into making sure the money gets into the hands of where it should be in order to better promote our community. Yeah, so definitely look for grant work based on, like, I was a big fan of Brown Girls. So when I looked at where their financing came from, I was like, oh, there's this grant, let me apply for it. Yeah, honestly, especially if you're niche, like grant work is the best way to get yourself out there, just because instead of submitting scripts to producers, you're submitting completed works and you're saying, no, like, look at this, and like, thank you. I mean, the whole Stranger Things Nancy Drew was kind of what we're going for. Thank you, that's really, yeah, no, that's exactly what we're going for, and you're right. And it is like really hard, especially when you're not doing what they want you to do on stage. Like in a lot of my work, there are a lot of people die every episode. A lot of people kill each other. So like that is really hard because that's like you don't want a murder mystery or like a science fiction drama when it comes to like the Muslim community. Yeah, I mean, it's a really hard sell. Like, if I was like to be like, this is a really dramatic show where this like woman's crying for a half hour once a week, I think that would get picked up pretty easily. In fact, I've seen that on television. But yeah, when you're like pumping it into anything that's sort of like what they consider radical is like really, really hard to do. But yeah, I mean, like the whole Stranger Things, I always think about it in terms of like, why does a weird thing happen in an all-white community, right? Like if like an alien just landed and they chose a random place on the map, like it always seems to happen in the suburbs, or like, right, where you're like, what the hell? Like, and there's always like a weird racial makeup where it's like 4 white kids and like 1 black kid, and like, yeah, it's maybe Asian, I don't know. Like, we won't get specific. Nobody's looking for specificity. Yeah, so afterwards, I'd love to talk to you about a couple of resources for, seems like you need more like distribution since you're already done. And there's a lot of organizations that will, for distribution, since you're already completed, they have a quick turnaround time for getting back to you with like, if they can help and with what resources. Thank you so much. No? Oh, no problem.
Any other? Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah.
Well, first and foremost, my name is Curtis. I'm Curtis Smith, and I grew up. I've been living in the Bronx for like 30 plus years, and then started school in 1990. When I was a kid, I started school in '04, and then back in 2001, I became secretary of the secretary of student council, like besides what I posted. Yeah, and then became vice president of the student council, and then I started. And then I graduated. Then I graduated 12 years ago, and now the thing is, I'm 33 now, and I'm associate. I'm associate of. And now I'm associate in Bulletin in Yonkers. The thing is that I was in school. I was in student. I was in school for 17 years, and then graduated from A11. Went from 176 to A11, and now when I was a kid, my mom, and then I was in the Bronx. Then I grew up in over Washington Avenue, then Briggs Avenue. Right before my dad and my mom was separated, and my mom and my dad was separated, and now my mom is remarried to my stepfather, and now she gonna have her 10th year anniversary coming up in about next week. So the thing is that, and I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for losing your father. Like I lost my grandmother too. I lost two of my grandmothers. Passed away. One on my mom's side, one on my dad's side passed away. And over 04, my grandma Connie passed away in 06. And our question is that how did you lose your father?
Thank you so much for sharing your information. My father, he passed away in 1996 with a heart attack. He was visiting my mom in Bangladesh, and it's that connection, you know. I remember I had a part-time job, and it was all the way to on 67th Street. And I would walk to 67th Street because I wanted to, you know. And then M15 is always there, right? M15 is always there, but you know, you're young, right? And you just you start walking. And now I realize why I enjoy hiking so much, you know, because I would just start walking, and as I'm walking, I would think about the things that we are learning in school, almost like a review of the things, because growing up in the tenement, I just want to tell you, I told you earlier, we had 3 beds in the living room. So I did most of my homework when my brother finished his Monday Night Football. And you know what time Monday Night Football finish? What time does it finish, guys? 11 o'clock. That's when I started my homework, because he would turn the TV off, and he was my big brother, so whatever he said, And there are pictures of me, like me hunched over, trying to do my homework that late, And I think tenement teaches you, like, flexibility, like I told you earlier, resiliency. And now I find those traits like life skill, right? And I'm at work, and my colleagues always say, or my boss, my admin would say, Abida, how are you able to like teach all day and have you have a meeting in the city, you attend that, and then on the weekend you're teaching 8-hour mental health training, because I'm a Thrive NYC trainer, community trainer. So I train people in churches, mosques, synagogue, mental health first aid. So they ask me, and I'm thinking, it might seem like manic energy, but that's the energy that I picked up being there. You learn to be flexible, you learn to be resilient, and you learn to take in whatever, that life that I was trying to get away from is the life that I became. And I'm actually happy that I'm able to multitask and do things with ease. Yeah.
So we're almost, we have time for one more, right? Yeah, okay. The one,
I wanted to thank all of the speakers and the interviewer. I wanted to thank all of you for your wonderful stories and examples of what your experience has been on the Lower East Side and in New York. I don't know if this is the appropriate place to ask this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I think this has been very anecdotal, and I'm curious because until I saw the notice about this happening, this event, it never crossed my mind that there were Muslims living on the Lower East Side. And so I was wondering if any of you have anything you could tell me about the community. I mean, when Muslims were first here, maybe it seems like your father was certainly a person who said, okay, we're going to be here. And has it grown? What is, we know a lot, or I have been through the Tenement Museum, know something about all these other groups that moved in, some moved out, some moved on, whatever. But I have no concept of the Muslim American community in the Lower East Side. So anything, again, your stories were wonderful, but I don't think they address.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. My father moved to this country after the 1971 war in Bangladesh, and he came here as a refugee. So I know the stories that he told us and the pictures that I saw in our album. We used to have family albums, that there are a lot of Muslims living in this community. I've seen it with my eyes because they used to come to our house. There was a party in our house every time, and when I say party, it was about immigration, how to prep someone for, how to get a visa, how to become legal, how to prep for an interview, DMV license. Nowadays, it's so simple. Like you click on the, internet and you fill out some forms, and you get your license on the mail. But at that time, it was people used to come and they, so it was a rich community. We, as Sister Rashida mentioned, we would have communal prayers, Friday prayers. I remember people would, get dressed and go to the masjid on M15 to a point where my father would ride the M15 so much that the driver would be, he would enter the bus and the driver would be like, no, Imam, it's fine. And he would like, everybody got to survive, right? So he would put the token, But it was, the driver was like, you're riding the bus to the masjid every day. And so the bus driver was part of the community, And we would have other imams coming. We had marital disputes, interracial marriages. There were a big no-no, and I think they're a big no-no sometimes in some cultures still today, right? And I mean, these things are still, alive and fresh. I remember there were disputes that were handled so well in our living room. And my father did that. The parents would come. I was held at a gunpoint in front of our tenement building. And my father said, this was done by a community member. And so it must be handled in the community. So we had, I think the living room was smaller than this. We had the entire community in our living room dealing with what was my father going to decide. Was he going to call 911? Because this is a serious, problem. He said, no, I just want to hear what was the cause of the pulling that gun on my daughter. because she doesn't love you? Well, then if you can prove she loves you, I'm going to get her married today with you. I was like, what is he talking about?
Is
That-
it sort of like you catch him with cigarettes, so you make him smoke the whole pack?
I was like, is he for real? You know, so that sense of community, everybody was sitting there, and obviously, you know, that this was, you know, it was not true. So that person made a mistake, and the apologies were accepted. It was a community thing. So rich sense of community. We shared 147 Orchard Street. I remember there were 6 floors. Almost every floor had Muslims. Still today, when I took Elizabeth, the investigator for MAP, on the other day when we met, I said, Elizabeth, would you like to go see 147 Orchard Street? I ring the bell. The person who was living at that time, that family is still there. And so she said, Abida, oh my God, you're here. She opened the door, she welcomed us, and she was like, would you like to eat something? She was offering us things. And, you know, Elizabeth said they're still here. And so there are people still living in these buildings that I know and I'm connected with. I come visit them, they go visit us. Someone moved to Georgia, Atlanta. They visit us still from different parts of the country. We're still connected. We're like, you know, family. Because you have that look, like we're the people from Lower East Side. That's our identity, you know? Yeah.
A census report though, or something to
Yeah.
tell us, you know, who knows? You don't identify your religious identity. Census, do you? You don't. Oh, yeah, you don't. So we wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know the answer. You need a researcher. Yeah. You need a researcher. You need an ethnographer. Yeah.
I mean, there's a book called Bengali Harlem, which talks about Muslim people have been here since the 1800s.
Yeah, I mean, when they
They-
took out-
they-
Makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when
Well,
they-
there's also Little Syria, which is in like
They,
the west
which,
side.
which is basically they came off the ships. They would run. They would jump off the lashkars. Would jump
Yeah.
off the ships and
Well, the
actually
slaves.
married black people in Harlem and set up families because they didn't have, they had no women here. It was all men, and so Muslims have been in New York City since the 1800s.
They even exhumed black Muslim slaves from the spot of 9/11 after the towers went down when they were pulling up the ground. So that's a testament to how long they buried under metropolitan buildings.
I think, you know, again, it goes back to this invisibility, visibility, and diversity. Muslims don't have something that says, I am Muslim. How do you know somebody is Jewish? Not every Jewish person wears a yarmulke. Not every Jewish woman cut her hair and put on a wig. You don't know when you see somebody walking, looking a certain way, they could be Muslim. Just like that woman I told you, that Yugoslav woman. I assumed she was Jewish. And so I think you have, that's not a question I think a Muslim person can answer. I think it's a question that has to be asked of a non-Muslim person. What do you know about Islam in New York? Why isn't the history of Islam or Muslim people on the Lower East Side as known as Jewish people? You have tremendous culture here. You have a Yiddish theater and all sorts of things and painters and whatever, but you don't know if Muslim people were also artists, but anglicized their names because that seemed to be what it meant to be an American, or have teachers anglicize their names as a teacher did to my son's name. So I'm just saying that it's not that we're not visible, but I think in the wake of 9/11, 9/11 has changed the culture of Islam for Muslims as well as non-Muslims, and now Muslims are trying, I think, to redefine themselves on their own terms, exclusive of 9/11, because we don't. I think it's very interesting. 1619 is supposedly the official year of chattel slavery in America. But how many African people in this country walk around saying, oh, since 1619, da 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 da? That doesn't happen. So I think there's some other stuff going on in that, why we don't know about. It's not a question that I can answer.
Well, thank you very much, everyone.
When you see a Muslim, you tell them Ramadan Mubarak.
Yeah, Ramadan Kareem.
Mabruk Ramadan.
Mansoor. Sorry? Mansoor Ali. I'm glad I came.